Hello, and this is Jonathan McGuinness here from the Questions of Fire group that we have just started off. I'm very excited today because we have a third podcast with a very driven lady who I'm just about to introduce you to. First of all, I'd just like to give those of you who are new a quick background to Questions of Fire and why I'm doing this. Myself, in 2007, I backed myself into a corner with communication. I didn't realize it, and sometimes everything comes together and it ended up being a problem. Slowly, I started to find a way around that or through that by the use of questions and how I looked at the world and how other people had different perspectives using questions to make it work for them. And my world started to expand and my communications got better. Over the course of 11 years, and that's how long it took me to get from having an original problem in 2007 in Zurich, I remember where it was when it happened, to 2018 when I launched my book on Amazon, Questions of Fire, where I consolidated my understanding of how we can use questions for our benefit to communicate better and also recognize where somebody else is coming from. So that has been fabulous. And now as a follow-up in 2020, I've decided to set up this group and maybe even for my own benefit, talk with driven people who definitely have questions of their own that are working fabulously so that I can and we can understand and let them share how they're driven, why they're driven, what questions they ask themselves, and how they've got to the places that they have. Okay, so enough about questions of framework and myself. Let me introduce you to our very special guest today. And I'm going to call her Dr. Sandra. This is a very accomplished lady. She's a medical doctor. She's also a national level high performance athlete, I will call it, with bodybuilding. And she has a list of other activities that she's very active involved with her community, whether that's on trying to influence people in a very good way from her medical standpoint, from her understanding in other ways. And I have been fortunate enough to be in a couple of networking groups with Dr. Sandra. And, you know, she really answers a question when she answers a question. So, you know, there's nothing held back. And it's fantastic to have you on board today. And welcome, Sandra. Thank you very much for joining the podcast.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Excellent. Well, let's start with maybe, you know, you do a lot of things, Sandra, and I just started even the tip of the iceberg. I have a list of a lot of other things, but I got to pick only on one of the aspects of where you really excel, and that's an unusual sport for some people. It's not everybody else has the discipline to go, I don't know, to the gym or eat and sleep in such a way that you can bring your body to the peak of what it could be. So maybe you could tell us a little bit, you know, why did you even decide, oh, hold on, that inspires me. I want to do that for myself and I'm going to push my limits?
It's quite an interesting question because I initially actually started in the age of 4 with figure skating.
Okay.
Also on competing level. And I did it until I started my medical degree.
Yeah.
So 15 years long. And I stopped it also for the reason of lack of time.
Okay, absolutely.
Because it took 4 hours. It was drawing 4 hours a day.
Wow. Okay, so it's absolute dedication if you do it.
Exactly. It was not possible to be done parallel with medical studies. So I had to find something which is doable in a time I had available, and which is involving a person like me to the same extent.
It was engaging
because
enough for you.
I have always been hyperactive. I'm playing piano. I did my medical, piano, my music school, parallel with ice skating, parallel with school, with competing in maths, biology, chemistry, whatever. I didn't leave anything out, so I needed something to keep up. And bodybuilding seemed to be very static sport. It is actually, you're not running, you're not moving a lot.
Yeah.
But it is drawing enormous amount of energy. It is it works with your own body weight. It works with extra weight. So it is heavy weightlifting. So it is drawing an enormous amount of energy. And it was something that I could imagine doing for a very long time.
So
That is how it started.
Can I ask you, Sandra, did you meet someone? Did you go to a gym? You know, what was it that, okay, and just started and then after 3 months think, oh, I really like it? Or did you see a magazine and thought, oh, cool, I'd like to do that? Or how did the transition to bodybuilding happen?
It was a soft transition, because in figure skating you have 4 trainings in one of which is actually weightlifting, because you have to have your legs strong, you have to have your body strong. So you do that with weightlifting. You have on top of that ballet classes and all the other classes, but you do have part of it also bodybuilding. So it was sort of a soft transition.
Yeah.
I had to replace my need to dance with some other activities parallelly to bodybuilding. So I didn't want to keep it only on bodybuilding. So I did know how to do it. I just intensified it and made it to sport of its own.
Excellent.
With the time available I had, which was no longer 4 hours a day.
Yeah, so that was what I was going to get. You've got to quite high levels now in Switzerland, which is where you are, up on a national level with respect to bodybuilding. So how much of your day, of your energy, maybe in the gym and out of the gym, does it take between training, eating, sleeping, discipline? You know, for somebody who doesn't know about bodybuilding, and you're someone at the top of the game, what would they even have to think about if they were to go in that direction?
I would say it is any sport. I wouldn't put bodybuilding as separate. Any sport you want to do on a certain level, you need to invest energy and time and dedication, of course, because you're pushing your body to limits. And at these limits, it can hurt. These limits, it can be uncomfortable. It can be tiring. It is also very much a psychological game.
Yeah.
So it is not only the physique. It is only also the mind which is following. It is. I would even say that mind is driving and body is following. I would even put it other way around. Because at critical points where body doesn't want anymore, when everything is hurting and when you can't even walk properly, then it's only the mind that wants to go further.
Yeah, you've given me some examples of what you eat and don't eat coming up to training, which are horrific. I'll wait till you tell the story. Well, horrific maybe not be the right word, but I couldn't imagine them doing myself. But maybe for the audience who don't know bodybuilding so well, imagine I'm a non-bodybuilder. How would you give me my first pep talk about what would be ahead of me if I was going to get into the sport?
You need to, during the competition preparation, you are training every day.
Every day,
or every day, or in worst case, 4 days and then a day break, and then 4 days and a day break. So it's very intensive. 2 hours per day, it's gone only for that, and that is really, it can't be reduced for less than that. In off season, like we are now, and I am also now, you can do it with 3-4 times a week.
So when is the off season and the on season, Sandra?
Well, on season is around competitions, so it's around 6 weeks prior to competition.
Okay.
6 weeks, around 6 to 8 weeks prior to competition, you need to start to do it very intensively.
Yeah.
I even tend to do it 3 to 3.5 months before the competition, because I'm no longer 20. So body adapts slowly. Body
takes more time. Okay.
It takes more time to adapt. It takes more time to build up muscle mass. It takes more time to reorganize your metabolism around it. Body does it itself very well, but it needs more time.
So a big question.
Different than my training pals, which are 25. It is different dynamics.
So like the training is one thing, and that's a
They can
lot
do
of
it in
hours
6 weeks.
a
I
day.
need 3 months for that.
Fair
So
enough, fair enough. How like I guess you have to become somewhat, and you're very lucky in this case. You're a doctor as well. You have to become somewhat of a nutritional expert and really know how your body responds to food. What were the main learnings that you had from a bodybuilding perspective in terms of what you eat, what you don't eat, what you drink, what you don't drink?
okay, I have to say I have a degree in nutritional sciences as a postgraduate degree, and I'm medical
Okay.
doctor, so I was my own nutritional specialist. But
Yeah.
yes, you do need one definitely, because you need to, and it is very different to the baseline what you start with. If you start with athletic body and want to build up a little further and to get to the certain level, then of course you need less. If you, then if you start from totally body which hasn't been exposed to regular sport, it is never too late to start, but it needs to well, it needs a special nutritional plan, of course, depending on whether weight loss is part of it. No, it's not necessarily always part of it. In my case, it was not. But
Yeah.
if the weight loss is part of it, then it needs to be adapted accordingly. Less carbs, more proteins, etc. It's always a lot of proteins. It is for that type of sport you need very much of proteins.
So
So
so like
large amounts of milk products, large amount of meat. Vegans, I'm very critical about the stories about vegans being top athletes. They are trying to push it now politically very strongly.
yeah.
But none of the vegans who is claiming that it's that vegan nutrition and sport are going together is active sportist any longer. So all these have done their sports at the time when they were eating meat and milk products. Meat you
Okay.
may be able to skip, but then you need to replace it with huge amounts of milk products. I have been ovo-lacto vegetarian until my cancer,
Yeah.
which I had some years ago. And I was, and still am, drinking a liter of milk per day, plus
Wow.
cheese, plus eggs, plus also meat
So
meanwhile.
so if you're lactose intolerant, bodybuilding is not for you for sure.
If it's not necessarily, but you will have difficulties. You will have a lot of restrictions. You
Okay.
can do it because lactose is not protein. You need protein, so
Sure.
you will
But
still be able to. You will
you
still
are
be able to
mentioning a
do
lot of
it.
dairy products. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. You will have some restrictions, and you will have to make up for those restrictions somewhere else.
And how many times a day would you eat? Like because the normal person per se is breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How coming up to competition in particular, and that maybe gets very special, but would you eat? I heard stories of people eating 5, 6, 7 times a day. How
Yes.
does that work?
Yes. I have to say I'm a little atypical in that respect. My body is simply not taking it. I can't eat 6 times a day. I simply can't. I have tried. I can't. It's
Okay.
simply not working. Not for me. I would have liked to, because that would bring me more volume.
Yeah.
I could compete in higher class.
You could put on more
But I
mass. Yeah.
personally can't. Yes, you need to bring energy in. You need to
Okay.
gain weight. You literally need to gain weight in order to transfer that weight into I'm sorry, I'm some. So transfer that weight into muscles.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so you need to you literally need to really gain volume, and that is something you are doing eating. Simply
Sure.
eating, but eating clever, eating lean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
no fats, lot of proteins, lot of meat, lot of and good carbs, lot of rice, for example. As a typical bodybuilder meal is cooked rice with cooked chicken.
Okay.
Chicken
So
breast, for example, with
so then,
cooked rice and
uh,
vegetables to that.
okay. On the mental side of that, then, Sandra, to eat certain foods all the time when you probably have desires and cravings for other things, and go training 3 or 4 hours a day or 2 hours a day, depending on where you're at in your year, that requires a consistency, and it definitely requires a goal orientation and a lot of drive. So, what
That does.
keeps you in it, or are there moments when you say, "I'm not doing this anymore. It's too tough"? What's the psychology behind a bodybuilder that gives them that drive to, you know, do almost unnatural things with their body and their diet, to reach that goal? What does that for you, Sandra?
It is to the larger extent the self driver.
Yeah.
It is self motivation, which works to the larger extent, and I wouldn't limit that only on bodybuilding. It is common for any goal you want to reach, any sport on that level you want to pursue, also any business goal you want to reach. Uh,
And
also in business, you have situations where you are so emptied, you are so tired, you are so lack of energy, you can't do anymore, and you would like to sleep another 2 weeks and not wake up at all, maybe 2 weeks later. But
and
you
do
have
you,
such moments, but they are uh, it is mental power which comes in these moments.
so, like, I love self-development. I read a lot. I do courses and everything from, first thing I get up in the morning, I'll ask myself a question. I have my own question: is what wonderful and unexpected things will I make happen today? What does a bodybuilder say to them, or what do you specifically say to yourself? And it doesn't have to be a morning question or anything, but what are the types of things that keep you on track? Because I'm sure you have moments where it doesn't feel as desirable to do the thing. So, what do you say to
It
yourself, or
is
what do you think about?
exactly these moments come short before competition, because at that moment you are very tired, you are on the edge or beyond the edge of your powers and whatever your body can offer.
Yeah,
Your immunity is also very low at that very moment. Your skin is very thin, you have no fat tissue at all. I mean, you have I had 6% of body fat tissue in the body fat content
wow,
prior to my
okay,
competition.
wow,
So
okay,
you literally have no defense. You have really no defense, and you feel that on all levels.
mm-hmm.
Uh, so it is really the wish to go another step after you have been so far, just to not to stop just before the goal. And it is very
Yes,
much of mental power.
okay,
It
and
is
and, and
it is really the main driving force, which is bringing you in that. These last maybe 2 weeks are really critical. 2 weeks
yeah.
2 weeks out to the competition, and these are really very very crucial mentally.
And
Last week is very crucial
okay.
physically because all the manipulations are happening then.
So two things come to mind. One is, how do you keep going? You said you've been doing this for a few years. It takes longer now also to do the preparation. Will you do it again next year? Will you go for the national
Yes,
competitions? How do
yes, I will.
you're still motivated to keep going at it? And
Yes,
then
I
I,
am. Nevertheless, I allow myself breaks. Some
okay,
don't. I was I'm constantly exchanging my experiences with other co-athletes, and also with some competitors. What are they doing? How are they doing? And I tend to allow myself breaks. Decent breaks. I
well,
have now had break of 2 months. It is
yeah,
not good. You have to you know that you are decreasing in these 2 months. You know that you will have to invest an effort first to come back to where you were 2 months ago.
sure, sure.
Um, you know that it is not visible on everyday basis, but it is visible on your performance in the gym, basically during the training. But you also know that you need this time. Okay, maybe not 2 months. I have now let it loose a little consciously.
Yeah.
I wanted to do it that way. My competitor, for example, she has got 2 small kids, so she also used the time with her kids, for example. She made it in that way, for quality time for her family. So everybody has their own, and you compensate with that. You gain energy, both mental and physical, in these breaks, in order to be able to then do your best then when you have to do your best, because you know what does it take.
So in the end, I've seen a couple of bodybuilding shows, and I used to look at the magazines when I was younger. I was training myself, and you're up there on show, like for a man in like a swimsuit and a women in bikinis, and you're in the best shape of your life. What's the feeling like getting up on stage to show off your body? Well, I've never done it, and do the poses, and there's almost like dancing that goes on, like posing routines and music and competition. What's that feeling like to get on stage and perform in front of a crowd?
It is like in how should I explain that? It's like on adrenaline, on adrenaline path. You are very much you're feeling like you are, I would say, like you on the drugs, although you are not, but it is in a way, it is endogenous drugs. It is endorphins which you are producing in that very moment. It is adrenalines. It is this cocktail of hormones which gets you to feel content, dopamine as well. Now I lost you.
No, you're there.
You there?
You're there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you really feel at your best. You feel the most powerful. You are very focused on your performance, of course. You also a little nervous about your performance, because it is at the end of the day performance. Things can go wrong. You can floor can be slippery, or you can fall. A lot of things can happen. So it is not a dance. It's far away from the dance. You are standing there in a tight position for minutes long. Have to smile. Have to stand there and waiting that you are being judged. You are being judged on your posture. You're being judged on your body shape.
And that's a very good question. That's a very good question. There's lots of, I imagine your competitors are all in the best shape of their life. So they're going to pick you as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or whatever position. How do you feel when you get a judgment? In a way, it's a judgment or a classification. Okay, Miss Sandra, you are 3rd position, or whatever that is. How does that feel at the moment?
Put in this way, last year, it was for me the biggest success for me was that I managed to go back to competitive sport after my cancer, and in the age of mid-40s, which is everything else but not natural. I mean, it is still natural.
Sure, but that's
not something you would just do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You see, I was in, of course, we have, women have 2 groups, below and above 35. But it is still a huge difference between 35 and 45 in body shape, in skin quality, in muscle quality, and all these things which are a lot different in this age span. With men, it goes even further up. Men also have groups 50 plus, for example.
Yeah.
And they really do have competitors in that age group still. So you are very focused on your own performance
Sure,
at that
sure.
very moment. You don't see the stage. You don't see
The people.
you don't see the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Even if your family is sitting in maybe if a family is sitting in the first line you still see, but second line you don't perceive anymore.
Okay, and so that's a huge event, Sandra. When you're up on your own show, and there's then the prize givings and whatever. And I don't know, we all go to concerts or we go to big self-development courses, and the great thing about them, in the moment, the amount of energy is absolutely fantastic. But then you go home,
That is true.
and there's the week following it, and I don't know what it's like for a bodybuilder, but when I do those big events afterwards, sometimes there's a little bit of euphoria that continues, but sometimes there's a little bit of a mini depression that happens of the lack of focus, the lack of things to do, the time off. How do you manage like the post show, we say time? Let's put it that way.
Yes, it is called. It is there is actually a name for that. It's called post-competition blues.
Okay, that sounds good.
And it is indeed defined in a science. It has been examined, and it does indeed happen, and it is on the level of post-traumatic stress syndrome in principle. It is that mechanism which is going on because you have been up for a very long time, one goal after another, and then the huge performance, and then afterwards nothing. And
how do you manage
people,
that?
I had that a little. Sorry.
How do you manage that?
Excuse
How
me,
do you manage that feeling? How do you manage that feeling?
You have. I mean, I had to find an appropriate compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Something to fill the time and something to fill the energy. To decrease this gap, because there is a huge energy gap. So to decrease it a little, to lift energy level a little from the bottom, so that this gap is not so noticeable anymore. Okay. And I did it with walks. I did it with meeting friends. That was still before Corona. I did it with professional involvement. I was very active professionally at that time.
Okay.
Because that exactly needed this energy, which I still had, and that was still remaining from the competition itself.
So I have one question, because you mentioned it here during the call, is you had cancer a couple of years ago, Sandra, and you know, yes, some people when they suffer from cancer, their life afterwards can be quite different in many ways. Can go in similar, can go worse, and can go better. You decided to get back on the horse, get back to bodybuilding, which, you know, in itself, even for a person who hasn't suffered from anything, is quite a challenge. What drove you to say, okay, I want to get back and still be my best at whatever I can be after having gone through cancer?
Exactly that. You have, as a cancer survivor, extreme urge to go back to life. That is part of the survival process. I can't run away from knowing how does it function, to mention also the mechanism, because I have really experienced it in that way. Before, I was reading about it in medical books. Afterwards, I felt it on my own skin, and I felt how strong the survival drive is. I was running 10 kilometers with my husband. I was going jogging 10 kilometers during my chemo. When I think of that today, there would be nothing getting me out of the door to go and run 10 kilometers after I have been 6 hours on a chemo.
Yeah.
Such crazy things beyond any logics is something that is part of survival instinct, and that survival instinct is extremely strong in any any being, any human being, any animals. This is really survival instinct, which is driving you, and which is
What?
also driving you afterwards
Yeah.
to go back
No, no.
to life.
And maybe Sandra, could I ask?
I would,
Oh yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
what I may what where I may point that my path may have been a little different than what you hear, especially with women, but also some men. Women and men have different way to deal with physical loss, and cancer is definitely one.
Yeah.
It is attacking your body on very, very brutally. It is taking your performance away. It is taking your possibilities away, and men tend to want to go back as quick as they can. And women tend to, that is what I have learned, because I have done medical, so I've done patient advocacy since. So I am helping women going back and coming back after they have had a cancer experience. And I have learned that in that course, that some women, or maybe even majority women, I would say, tend to not to want to go back. They tend to feel safe in their victim role. Because victim is carrying no responsibility. Victim is not driving anything, doesn't need to drive anything. Victim is there and it's waiting to be helped.
So then
And
that sounds like the ideal time for you're someone who has that instinct. So how do you coach or bring that survival instinct higher when someone doesn't feel it?
Sometimes you need to let the time pass. Sometimes
Okay.
you can't force it, but you can push it slightly. So you can guide the person who is totally out and who says, no, I don't want anymore, and I feel fine as I am, and I don't need to do that what I have done before any longer. Now I'm older anyhow, so she will find 1,000 excuses. Why not?
And how would you give her a little nudge?
By talking to her.
Okay.
By talking to her, and then also show her, because she sees me how I am. She is not listening to somebody who has never experienced it. She sees me who I am and how I am. And they are very often also very personal questions coming about, because she wants to identify herself with me.
So then I'm going to ask you what sounds like an obvious question now. We have an expression in Ireland, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And what that usually means is you had somebody in your life, I don't know whether it was parents or teachers or who were quite driven, and you've sort of picked that up somehow. Where did you get your survival drive, would you say, Sandra?
You are right. I mean, it is 2 generations of women in my family, both my mother and my grandmother. They were both cancer survivors.
Yeah.
Survivors is difficult to say, because they both at the end did die of my grandmother died of metastasis of breast cancer, and my mother died of heart attack after her heart was irradiated by an error, and medical error.
But they were driven ladies
during her radiation therapy. So, but they were both very driven. Very driven, and I was living in that environment. I was raised by, because my mother was very much on the way. She was country manager, respectively regional director, or whatever it was called at that point in time for IBM. I have to start. So she was traveling a lot, and my grandmother was still working. My grandmother was a pharmacist, She was still working, just about getting retired around that time.
Yeah.
So she had a little more time than my mother had at that point in time, when I was growing, when I was still a small girl, let's say, and pre-puberty. And I was growing, seeing these two women who simply didn't know what does the word "it's not possible" mean. That was simply not existing in vocabulary.
Okay, now that all makes sense, Sandra. That all makes sense.
So it was just so there was nothing which was not possible. It was just a matter of how are you doing it.
Very good, very good. Wow, I can see that. Yeah, I don't know. I can see that in your drive, and it had to come from somewhere. So I think you've gone through a lot of things, Sandra. What I'd love to ask you is, if somebody was about to start now, we'll go back to thinking about bodybuilding. What one or two things would you ask them to check or try or do before they made the commitment to get into it? Or is there any piece of advice you'd give to somebody starting out in it? It doesn't have to be something we covered now. Anything that you think is of importance to somebody starting out?
What I find very important is to get a relation to your own body.
Yeah.
To start to feel your own body. That is a learning process. It is not something which is given. For some, it can take years to come to the point that they can say, now I feel, starting from I do feel when I'm hungry and when I'm not hungry, until I start to know I feel when I'm tired or I'm not tired, or I feel when I'm about to catch a cold or I'm not about to catch a cold. That's all these small signs which body is sending out all the time and which we tend to ignore.
Okay,
and
so become sensitive.
Yes, and it's very important to get a good relation to your body and to start to like your body, to really start to enjoy your own body, regardless the shape, size, or whatever. But just to have a good relation towards your own body. I find that a crucial baseline for any sport. I would go even further in saying that is a crucial baseline for mental stability in many occasions, that you are feeling comfortable in your own body.
Yeah.
And from that point, then you can start. And then, of course, all tests can be done, and body mass index calculated, and body fat content, and whatever it needs to be calculated, and the plan made. But it starts from yourself.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Sandra. I really appreciate it, and it's actually, you've kind of, we say, consolidated one thing for me. It's very important who the people we have around us are. You give the examples of your mom and your grandmother, and we don't become driven if we don't hang around with, or are lucky enough to have in our family, people who are already driven. And thank you very much for sharing your ideas. It's much appreciated by me. And have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and you have a wonderful evening too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.